Hey, everybody, we're ready to go. Week 6 post-game edition here of Game Notes with my partner, Scott Shanle. I'm Victor Howell. Lots to talk about from a busy weekend all across the football world. Of course, we will focus on LSU's win over Missouri, some of the big highlights, but some of still the concerns for LSU as it turns to their defensive side of the ball. We'll talk about the Saints getting a big win in New England. Is that a true win, or should we be a little more concerned because of who they faced? I'm going to ask Scott his thoughts on that. And we'll talk about some of the big stories around college football. Of course, in Scott's backyard, the Red River Rivalry, as OU does get the win over Texas. Scott will tell us what the atmosphere was all about. And we may look at one of the worst beats in college football because of what happened with Miami and not taking a knee. Lots to talk about, Scott. So let's get to it. What'd you think of the weekend? This was one of those fun weekends, and maybe the best game. We're going to talk about it, but maybe the best game on the schedule, pro or college, took place at the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, it was a fantastic weekend for football. It was a clean sweep for the Shanle household. The high school team won that my son plays on. The Huskers won Friday night. My son goes to OU. OU cleaned up, beat Texas. The Saints win. LSU win. So it was a perfect weekend for football in our household. But yeah, my oldest, he's at OU. He's a freshman there, and he got to go down to the big game. And he said it was the best game he's ever seen. I'm so glad he got to experience. I was like, wait, best game you've ever seen? You were 6 when you were at the Super Bowl, so let's pump the brakes a little bit.
That's right. Well, we're going to talk about that. I'm glad he had such a good time. We had fun talking about that on Friday. We want to hear about it. But let's start with, and by the way, the college football weekend does get off to a big win with Nebraska starting things off. Maybe they should play more late midweek games instead of Saturday games. They got off to a Go Big Red, got it.
Yeah, Friday nights. Put them on Friday nights. I know it's high school night, and the Big Ten has this thing with playing Friday night games, but heck, you might get more eyeballs on some of the games on Friday nights.
Hey, they got it all started, so good job by the Huskers getting that win for you. Then let's go to Saturday because it was an early morning kick, second early morning kick in a couple of weeks for LSU because they had the same thing at Mississippi State. This time they go up to Missouri, an undefeated Missouri team where LSU does get the win. Offensively, once again, they are putting on quite a show, Scott. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Defensively, they still have big problems because their receiver went off. Missouri still goes off for over 500 yards, yet LSU does get the win. And I guess, Scott, bottom line is, however you got to get it done, you rebounded from licking your wounds on what happened at Ole Miss 1 week ago, and you got back in the win column on the road. In the SEC, you'll take that any day.
Absolutely. You know, if you're a fan of offensive football, especially if you're a Tiger fan, get used to seeing a lot of offense because this LSU offense, I think, has proven by now that they're going to be able to score a lot of points this year. The quarterback, Jaden Daniels, is playing outstanding. The receivers, Thomas, Neighbors, 2 of the best in the SEC. Great tandem, maybe the best combo in the country when you look at having to stop those 2 guys. And then we talked about Taylor at tight end. He's just scratching the surface of the type of player he can become. So LSU offense is extremely hard to stop. The defense just needs to improve a little bit. Really, if the defense just improves 10%, and helps the offense with a couple of stops throughout the game, they're going to win a lot of games. But right now, the defense has not shown any big signs of improvement the way they need to, especially as you get in the SEC schedule. But this offense is unreal.
Yeah, and after the ball game, Brian Kelly was talking about that. Look, you can talk about the receivers. You can talk about the big play. They got a pick 6 at the very end of the game. They take it in to kind of give the cushion for the score there. So a lot of highlights that you can try to look at. But Brian Kelly was adamant that there's one thing you need to look at, and that is the play of his quarterback. Here's LSU's head coach after the game talking about Jaden Daniels.
The real story here is, you know, individually, Jaden Daniels is just a warrior. I mean, he's tough, he's physical, he's smart, he's skilled. I don't know, I can't use enough superlatives about him individually. And then collectively, just a mindset of a tough football team going on the road when they've been, you know, just absolutely, beat up, how bad they are, and they respond against a really good football team, especially on offense. And I'm just really happy for my players.
Okay, so about the whole getting beat up thing, we'll get back to that in just a moment. But yes, Jaden Daniels and the way he's playing, Scott, the numbers he is putting up are just incredible. He was 15 of 21, did not have to throw the ball a lot in the game, but Scott, when he did, 15 of 21 for 259. That's over 17 yards of completion. Look, you make 5 of those, you've gone down the field from goal line to goal line, you're punching in the end zone. It's just amazing the consistency that he has put together this year in his second year at LSU.
It really is. And I think one thing you want as a coach out of your players is consistency. And you said the key word there, but to be consistently great in explosive plays, those are the hardest plays to make. Those are the lowest percentile plays to make. And he's making those consistently, whether it's the deep ball, whether it's taking off and running on 3rd and long. I mean, we said this last time. We saw Joe Burrow take that 1-year leap from junior to senior. You've seen it with Jaden Daniels. He's a completely different player, especially in the pocket. I mean, showing these clips, he has great running ability, but I've been so impressed by him standing in the pocket, going through his progressions, and making the big-time throws.
And to me, that's the biggest thing, Scott, is his reading ability where he doesn't feel like he has to take off. They are using him strategically now in terms of the run. They've got scheduled runs for him, but now they can call these pass plays where he does wait in the pocket, let his receivers have time, and then if they don't do it, he knows he's still strong enough to get past everybody and score. This is one of those plays. He took a cheap shot in the end zone here. He gets in the end zone, no penalties called, and then they wind up losing this touchdown. He took a shot to the ribs, but you know what he does? He comes back on the field and still does things like this. His toughness, too, has been second to none for this LSU team this year.
No, and the entire team. You can feel it when you have a leader. Everybody's going to rally around their best player on the team. And if your best player is also your greatest leader and your toughest competitor, that's when it raises the levels of play of everybody else. And I feel like when number 5 is on the field, when number 5 is making these type of plays, the entire team says, man, I need to pick up my level of play to match his expectations and the way he's playing, because he's just playing great right now, and it just brings out the greatness out of everyone.
Yeah, and his intensity, his intelligence on the field, the way he's been playing. Malik Neighbors in that ball game, Scott, 6 catches for $146. That's 24 yards a catch for Malik Neighbors. He had a touchdown. And Logan Diggs out of the backfield now, another 100-yard game. So you're starting to see that balance that I know teams look for on the offense. Mike Denbrock is the offensive coordinator. The reason why I mention him is because when you talk about the 2019 team and what Burrow did with Jamar Chase and with Jefferson, we always talked about Joe Brady, right? There was always a mention of what was going on with the passing coordinator and what was happening up in the offensive booth. The reason why I want to mention Denbrock's name is because when you look at the numbers, Scott, in the last 4 games in the SEC, his offense has gone for 530, 509, 637, and that was in a loss to Ole Miss. And then they hung 533 on Missouri. Scott, their lowest output this season was in game 1 of the season in a loss to Florida State. And even in that game, they went for 459. So what this offense is doing, and you and I heard Brian Kelly say it last week, it's not at 2019, but it's starting to get into the conversation of one of those elite offenses. And you got to give Denbrock credit the way he has now balanced what he can do with Daniels and the receivers. And now he's getting output from the backfield as well.
Yeah, utilizing all the talented players. Oftentimes we forget about the running game. When we see 40 points and 50 points scored in a game, everybody looks at the quarterback stats. Well, how many yards is the quarterback throwing for? Well, he's able to throw for yards because the running game has been existent. Anytime you can get the running game going and keep a defense off balance, it really opens things up. And I think they've been doing a good job of managing that aspect of the offense. Run the ball just enough. Don't take the ball out of your best player's hands, but they've been running the ball just enough to keep defenses off balance. And I think when you do that, when you can add balance to an offense with great players, defensively, you don't know what to defend. Really, you're just picking up your poison at that point, and you're just hoping that they don't find the weaknesses of the defense.
Yeah, so as long as LSU doesn't screw up anything on the offensive side, that side of the ball is humming on all cylinders, and you expect bigger things still to come when they've got Auburn coming to town here into Baton Rouge. Now, on the other side of the ball, and this is where I take a little bit of an issue with what Brian Kelly said with them getting beat up. Nobody's talked about his offense getting beat up. People have talked about the fact that your record has 2 losses on it because you lost to Florida State. We'll give you that one. But you had 637 yards and over 45 points in Oxford, and you still lost. They're not beating up the team. They're beating up the defense. But it's not that it's not that we're making it up, Scott. The numbers are there. Last 3 games for LSU's defense, 426, 706. That was the loss to Ole Miss, most yards they've ever put up. And you still gave up 527 to Missouri and needed a late game pick 6 to get in the end zone, which Brian Kelly said afterwards he would have preferred that he went down into the ground and just run out the clock instead of kicking it off again and even giving Missouri another chance. The way he even phrased it's like he expected, here we go again. We got to stop the ball, even though we're 2 scores up. So I don't know that it's everybody's beating them up, but I think there are some numbers that rightfully raise some red flags with this defense. You gave up 527. Again, you just were able to score more because your offense is better.
Yeah, I think the defense has been so bad that the offense is I think you see the offense playing at the level they're playing at, because they know going into games they have to score 40 points. And so it's getting the best out of the offense, and the play callers on the offense side of the ball are being extra aggressive because they know they can't score 20 points and win because of the way the defense is playing. But at some point defensively, Coach Kelly talked about last week, we have to coach the guys we have. And to me, I said that was a red flag. Like, he's kind of admitting we don't have the skill set that they want in LSU yet. And rarely do you hear that with LSU Tiger defense. But at the same time, when you're giving up that many yards, you have to look at maybe who you're playing, where you're playing them, what you're asking them to do. And then you go to scheme-wise. What are we doing that we're allowing people just to get 500 yards like it's nothing? That's a lot of yards. 5 trips up and down a football field with the recruits you're getting and the guys on the field in those uniforms. You have to look at schematically if there's something you need to alter.
Yeah. And in the Missouri game, Luther Burden, who you talked about last week, and he's a big-time stud. He had 11 catches for $149 for Missouri. But look, bottom line is LSU does go on the road to a school that is undefeated, and they get the win, a much-needed win. The other red flag here for Scott, and I was just looking at these numbers again, Missouri went 4 for 4 in the red zone. If you remember last week, we talked about LSU had only had one opportunity all season long where a team did not convert. That opportunity was against Grambling. They got in the red zone once and didn't convert. If you add up the rest of the season, Scott, opponents are 23 of 24 in the red zone against LSU's defense, and 17 of those 23 are touchdowns. So you only held them to 6 field goals, 17 touchdowns. So again, if you want to say that you're beating up on our team, I don't think the media public are necessarily beating up on them. We're looking at numbers like that, and it's a way of saying there's an issue there. All right, LSU DBU for this year is gone. That's non-existent right now. You just brought in Pete Jenkins. You had him for 3 days before Missouri. I'm not going to say he made a world of credit, but he's got a great defensive mind and can certainly try to help them with the scheme you're talking about. But to me, that's a red flag. That's not even insinuating it. That's coming straight out of the stats. I mean, that's right in front of you. That's why this is game notes. We're delivering numbers. 23 or 24 in the red zone with 17 touchdowns isn't going to get it done in the long run.
No, and I'll go back to the kind of the point I just made about schematics is if I'm a D coordinator and I get that stat thrown on my desk, I'm saying instead of talking about everything that's going on in between the 20s, because the guys you have, maybe they're not the athletes that you have had in the past at each position. I'm going right to that red zone statistic, and I'm saying, what can we do different in the red zone? If we can just make people kick field goals, if we don't even take the ball away, sure, we want to take the ball away and take away their opportunities to score, but if we can just cut those things in half and get them at a 50% rate where they're kicking some field goals, teams are not going to beat you with this offense. So as a D coordinator, I'm looking at what can we do differently first off in the red zone. We have to start making people kick field goals. We have to start eliminating these touchdowns, and then you can worry about everything else in between the 20s.
Yeah. Well, the Tigers now have gone through the brutal part of their schedule on the road. They'll not have the majority of the games in Tiger Stadium. Auburn's coming to town. Army will be here. Florida is still to come. And, of course, you got the one big game you still have is you have to go to Tuscaloosa and take on Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide, who are starting to find their identity a little bit. But, hey, at least for LSU, the good news is you're back in the winning track, and now you come home for a 6 o'clock kick next week in Tiger Stadium. So now let's go to Sunday, Scott. Let's transition here and talk Saints a little bit. We talked about the struggles they had 1 week ago and the fact that they didn't get in the end zone against Tampa Bay. Well, they certainly found the end zone a lot against New England, handing Bill Belichick his worst home loss ever. I want you to hear first before we dive into the game. Here's DA after the game talking about how everybody had to rise up to the challenge that was in front of them, and that was everybody doing better coaching and playing football.
Look, the challenge really was for everybody to be better. So this wasn't an offense, defense, kicking game deal. This was a New Orleans Saints need to be better. We had to coach better. We had to play better. And I thought everybody, coaches, players, everybody alike, answered the challenge this week.
Well, they needed to, Scott, and they did. They win by the score of 34-0. But I mentioned this at the top, and I want to ask you this right off the bat before we talk about some of the highlights. Look, in the NFL, you've often said you're playing against grown men that are getting paid just like you, so there's always a big challenge. This New England football team, Scott, is a bad football team. Mm-hmm. Bill Belichick has a losing record since Tom Brady left, and I'm not saying that to get into the whole who was better, Brady, Belichick, and who made the difference. But again, the numbers tell you he has a losing record since Tom Brady left New England. They did not look like they had confidence in anything they were doing on the field. So, yes, the Saints got right, 34-0. But should we give that an A+ win, or do you have to take it with a little bit of caution knowing that the team you were playing has one win, and I'm not sure how they have that, and I really don't know where they're going to get 3 wins this season. Do you have to factor that in any after you watched yesterday?
I don't, because winning in the NFL is hard. Going on the road is hard. Going into Foxborough and seeing those 6 banners hanging in front of your face, seeing the Hall of Fame head coach on the sideline, those things can be intimidating, especially when you're 2-2. Everybody's telling you how bad you are. Everybody's telling you should fire your offensive coordinator. Everybody's questioning your signing of the quarterback in the offseason. All those things are hard. So I don't take anything away. I think, yes, the Patriots are a bad team. And I think what's going on in New England right now is people have always thought that the Patriot way meant you could plug and play anybody. Well, that's not the case. Obviously, Tom Brady, but in the past, there were guys like Ty Law, Rich Seymour, Teddy Bruschi. There were great players doing it the Patriot way, and the Patriots don't have enough really great players. That's their problem. But I think for the Saints, the thing that came out of the game that stood out to me was finally the Saints got to play with the lead. It's so much easier when you have a lead and you can exhale as a player and you can just go fly around and have fun. And you're not pressing to make plays because you're trailing in a game. So many guys stood out, and Pete Werner with his first career interception, Tyrann Mathieu opening the game with a pick six, making a huge play like we so often used to seeing him make. Carl Granderson stepping up big, getting tons of pressure. You go down the list of guys who made Kamara, the offensive line played better. The offensive line finally got a game where they could just ground and pound for the fourth quarter. And I think there were so many guys, Blake Grupe hitting 2 kicks over 50 yards.
Yeah.
So many things when you look at it from an individual standpoint and just go down the roster. So many guys had great plays to build confidence and momentum coming out of this game that I think it was more than just a big time win for the team.
Yeah, no, and look, that's a fair enough answer. That's why I wanted to ask you, because I never was even close to the NFL. I'm looking at that and I kept thinking, this is a bad team. I mean, I told you last week on Friday on Game Notes, we talked about it on Saints Game Day when we did our television show. Mac Jones isn't the type of quarterback that should put fear in anybody, and he didn't. But I will give the Saints credit for this, Scott. If you're playing a bad football team, like you mentioned, them being bad is a them problem, not a you problem. Yeah. So the Saints went in and did what they were supposed to do. I guess my question may have been a little fairer if the Saints would have won 17-3 or 17-6. So I guess the good news is you went in against a bad football team and did what you're supposed to do if you're a better team, dominate them. And they did dominate. And as you mentioned from the start, they got a pick six, something they've needed. They needed to force turnovers. And DA talked about exactly what you just said, and that is getting the play with a lead early because the defense made a play. Here's Dennis Allen once again.
Being able to take the ball away, early in the game like that, and create a little bit of momentum on your side. I think our whole team kind of fed off of that, and that was certainly great to see. It's been a while since I can remember that we scored, on defense. And so that was a little bit of an emphasis this week, too, to take the ball away and, potentially score on defense.
And they certainly did that, Scott. To your point, you get off to a big lead. It was great to see Honey Badger get into the end zone, and then they could fly free. I had on my notes, I wanted to ask about Carl Granderson, too, because, again, Mac Jones, not a threat. We talked about the fact that New England had their backup quarterback taking snaps during the week. That usually doesn't happen with the first team, but we thought that might mean you're going to be on a short leash. I was surprised Mac Jones played as long as he did because he was proving he wasn't getting anything done against the Saints defense, but they were all over him, and I thought it started up front. I thought Granderson had an outstanding ball game for the Saints defense.
And it was great to see because, Carl's one of those guys. He wasn't a first-round pick where he just got rewarded a big deal because what happens is a lot of times organizations just reinvest in their guys that they've already invested in. Well, Carl, he took the long route. Carl got paid because he's been a very productive player. And so for him to come back after that big contract, a couple weeks of good play, but he was stellar. I mean, he pushed the pocket. Some of the things you always look for with a defensive end, and people always say, well, how many sacks do they have? He had pressures. He had a sack, but it's about what does he do play after play? How does he affect an offense? And he was giving their tackles a long day. And so he was making plays, and that was always good to see because his level of play, I don't think he scratched the surface of the type of player he can become.
Yeah, 3 turnovers overall for the defense, and they certainly had an outstanding game, not giving New England any chance to breathe at all on their offensive side of the ball. As for the Saints offense, Derek Carr has 18 completions, 183 yards, so still shy of 200 yards in terms of a total game performance. He does have 2 touchdowns, but I really think, in my opinion, Scott, it opened up more because we saw – look, Alvin had 23, 24 touches in week 1 we talked about. I know he had more this time in his second week of the season, but I thought his play opened up things a little more for Carr to be a little more relaxed. But I think what Alvin Kamara did really showed the Kamara that we saw not even last year, because last year you had the off-field incident with Vegas. That was on his mind, and lawyers telling him he can talk, he can't talk, avoiding the media. I thought, Scott, you got to go back 2 years, 2 seasons ago to see the type of Alvin Kamara that we saw play yesterday. He looked good, confident, and strong in his moves.
Yeah, Alvin looked like Alvin. And I think here's what Alvin said in the postgame, just in summary, is he said, we all had to get back to the basics. We all had a come together moment with the coaches and players. And I think what happened in that, and he wouldn't say what that was said in the meeting, but he insinuated that it was a moment where they said as players, let's get back to doing just the basic fundamentals of football. Let's get back to running the ball in between the tackles. Let's get back to leaning on people. We don't need all the gadget plays and all the different personnel groupings. Let's get back to base fundamentals so that we can take advantage of the talent level we have. And you saw yesterday, I thought he looked really good. Had he not come out of the game early and there wasn't such a blowout, he would have had 100 yards. But I think when you look at Alvin, the way he played, he looked like vintage Alvin Kamara. But also another bright spot of an individual that we didn't even mention was Kendra Miller, the rookie running back. He got tons of touches yesterday. In the passing game, looked really good. In the running game. So all these guys, it was a huge confidence-boosting game yesterday. But Alvin Kamara, he's going to go – this team will go as far as he can take them. In the run game and pass game, 41 needs to touch the ball 20-plus times every game for you to have a chance to win.
And if anybody missed it because of the game that he played, you can take a look right here that with the touchdown that he had yesterday, he is now all-time in terms of career touchdown leaders. Marcus Colston said he did reach out to him to tell him congratulations. Now 73 for Kamara as he passes Marcus Colston, Mark Ingram at third. And by the way, Kamara now needs just 40 yards to become number one all-time in Saints history in all-purpose yards. Here's what DA had to say about Kamara after the game.
Yeah, look, I mean, he's been outstanding for our football team. Both in terms of his production on the field and in terms of his leadership in the locker room. I think it's been awesome. There's some plays in the game today that probably don't stand out to the naked eye, and yet you just watch some of the his ability to make guys miss and create plays is pretty awesome. I thought he ran the ball exceptionally hard today, and so we've been working to get that 73rd touchdown. So it's been a while for us to finally get it. So it was good for that to happen.
And Scott, I know you'll appreciate it more because you've been in that locker room and in that huddle, but I love hearing him say that there are things that most fans to the naked eye wouldn't notice. But again, it goes back to just doing the little things. And even if you're doing the little things that aren't putting numbers in the stat column, that helps you win. And maybe that even goes back to the meeting you said he had when they said, let's just get back to the basics. He certainly, to me, was the big trigger for him.
Absolutely, there was. And, we watch games, and I am guilty of it too, now being a fan, and I forget as a player just how much time goes in between each Sunday. How much film is studied, how many weights are lifted, how many practice reps. I mean, I'll never forget, and I always tell people, the exactness of this league is just so precise. I mean, to the inch. I'll never forget as a rookie, I would line up, and my linebackers coach was Lovie Smith with the St. Louis Rams. And he's like, hey, you need to move a half a foot over, or you need to move 3 inches to the right. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, are you serious? Like, who cares? And it matters. It kept you from, it would keep the guard from getting in the right gap. You would get to where you're supposed to get to faster, just that little bit. And it's such an exact league. So when you hear Dennis talk about just getting back to the basics, get back to the fundamentals, doing the little things right, sometimes as a player, you forget that those exact details, your alignment, your stance, all those things really matter in the end. They really do. They seem minute and not a big deal to players at times, especially the longer you play, you start to forget about those things. But I think they had a reset moment last week after being 2-2 and said, let's get back to the basic things. The things that we were all taught that matter in this league, let's get back to doing them.
Is that a sign, too, the fact that they had that meeting? And I don't know, maybe you had these in your days wearing the Saints uniform. Remember, Dennis Allen said, hey, we're not panicking. But remember, we kept talking about the sense of urgency in his voice. He wasn't panicking. He was close to the panic button because he knows they should be 3-1. They didn't hit the button. But do you have a meeting like that because you realize now the sense of urgency before panic does set in? That would that have been the stimulus for the meeting? Did you ever have any of those? And maybe that's what spurred this on? Yeah,
absolutely. I think as a team and a player, when that moment's getting close to, like, we're 2-2. We should be 3-1. People can tell that our offense is not going well. We don't like the way it feels. There starts to be grumbling among players in the locker room. Coaches and organizations can feel that tension. They can feel the elephant in the room. And I think it's important you get it handled early so that players know, and fans and GMs and owners, they know these coaches are doing everything possible. They identified the problem, because I think the worst thing you can do as a coach, and you see it in the NFL all the time, there's no problem here. What are you talking about? What are you guys even talking about? We got it handled. And once you do that, you don't admit there's a problem, that problem's going to exist and it's going to get worse. So I give these guys a lot of credit for listening to everybody on the outside. A lot of times they say, don't listen to the outside noise. The Saints admitted there was a problem. They knew there was a problem. They got it corrected for 1 week. Now it's about stacking those. It's about, Dennis says, let's stack wins. You got an opportunity now in 12 days for 3 games. That's a lot of football coming up. But now, can you stack consistency? You showed us what you can be as a team on the road in New England. Now, can you do that this week? And then can you do it on a short week against the Jaguars? That's the key to me is showing us, you showed us who you are. Now, can you do that consistently?
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, we talked about the importance of the first 6 games. Now with this win, at worst, you're going to be 3-3. And again, at some point we'll stop thinking what you should be, but it's easy right now because we're in the moment. You should be the chance to go 4-2. We know that's not going to happen, but at least at worst, you're going to be 3-3. You can still get that win and get the 4-2 where you should be 4-2 instead of 5-1, right? Because of the game they gave away. But at least through the first 6 with 4 of the 6 on the road, you now have a chance to get the 4-2. At worst, you'll be 3-3. But no doubt, C.J. Stroud's a different quarterback, what they're going to face, and a new rejuvenated Houston team next week on the road. And then the short week against England's favorite football team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who just played 2 straight overseas and got another win against Buffalo. Then you'll get them on the short week. We should also mention, and you talked about the rookie running back and what he did. How about the great feel for Foster Moreau to get his first touchdown as a Saint? A guy who played in the LSU colors, spent time with Derek Carr in Vegas. Of course, then he gets diagnosed with cancer. He comes down here and has all the medical issues. Not only does he bounce back and get back on the field, but he gets his first touchdown as a Saint. I love to see the way the team celebrated with him. I just thought it was a small moment, but I thought it was a huge moment, and I was really happy for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody knows what Foster's been through, getting the diagnosis when he was on a free agent visit with the Saints. Right. Saints signed him and overcame that. And to be on the road, and like I said, in that environment with the Patriots, and it was a great play call, too. You got to give Pete a lot of credit for the shovel pass to the tight end. You don't see that a whole lot of times. Usually it's a shovel pass to a running back, but I love that they had a play designed for Foster in that situation to get in the end zone. So, yeah, it was a great feeling, great story, and I'm happy for him. I hope he kept that ball.
Yep, I hope so, too. And it'll be a big stretch, as you mentioned, for the Saints with 3 games in about 12 days. Next up, we'll be on the road at Houston, and then the quick turnaround with Thursday Night Football. So we'll look forward to that. All right, we're almost 30 minutes in, so let's talk about the fun stuff now. How was your boys' weekend? For those who weren't with us on Friday, Scott's son goes to OU, went back home to Texas, was able to get tickets to the game. We talked about I used to grow up there. I used to live in Dallas, and I know they split the street right down the middle. All the OU fans were on one side, Texas fans on the other side. It is quite a weekend. So how was the experience down at the Cotton Bowl for him with OU getting that big win against Texas in what was, my mind, the best game of football all weekend long, pro or college?
Oh, it was a fantastic game. It was great, and I'm sure it was a better experience for him and his buddies because they won. And it wouldn't have been quite as fun if they would have had to walk around with people throwing up the Longhorns in their face the entire time. But definitely the outcome dictated the level of intensity and how much fun they had in the day. But that game was amazing, and I think I said at the beginning of the year, I said Oklahoma was one of those sleeper teams. I watched it. They played Arkansas State, and I know Arkansas State versus Oklahoma is a mismatch, but they looked like a playoff team. I mean, every level, great offensive line play, experienced quarterback, explosive receivers. Their defense was very physical. Venables is a guy who he's kind of old school. You go to OU practice, they're in full pads, they're tackling to the ground. He doesn't mess around when it comes to playing physical football. So it was great to see that. It was a great game. I think Texas is a lot better than people thought. That win on the road against Alabama is the reason I think they were favored to beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma, nobody really knew about, but they're a well-coached team, and I think these two teams will meet again, and it'll probably be playoff spot on the line as well as Big 12 championship.
And look, this game, you had interceptions. You had Texas blocks a punt in the end zone. They get a touchdown. Now you're up by 10. OU forces the fumble there on the field. You go down the stretch. Now Texas comes down the field, takes a 3-point lead. And how about the composure to make this pass in the back of the end zone with 15 seconds to go that helped you seal the deal? I mean, from start to finish, end zone to end zone, the way the crowd was, a Hail Mary here at the end. What do you got to do? You got to knock it down. But they're able to get it up to the end zone. You've got 7 guys back there. I just thought, end zone to end zone, highest seat in the stand to lowest seat on the front row. It just brought back, and you said it last week, Scott, with so many things changing in football. And you told us you had heard in Dallas they wanted to move this to AT&T Stadium. Why? Look at what this game delivered in the stadium where it has been for years, and that atmosphere. Too many teams are getting away from that and going corporate. I just thought it was the best 3.5 hours of the entire weekend.
I agree 100% with you. I think there's parts of college football that we need to, the nostalgia part of it that we need to keep. It's the state fairs right outside the building. Yes, it's an old stadium. It's one of the oldest stadiums that college kids will play in. But you can't, there's no suites for people to sell, like you said, to all the corporations. So I'm sure money always dictates everything. But you can't take away the feeling that those kids, the UT students, the OU students, the alumni get from going to that game and reliving those moments over the past how many years that they've been there. So I hope they keep that game there forever. It'll be interesting to see how that game is affected by the SEC change. Those teams going to the SEC, I don't know how that's going to play out. If they're going to be able to play every year anymore with all the teams in the new minor league farm system of the league that's going on around the country. But yeah, it was a fantastic game.
You mentioned Brett Venables. Here's what he had to say after the ball game and a big win for his team.
It was fun to be a part of, a game like that. But I can't brag enough on our players. Just their toughness, their leadership, their effort, their strain, their love for one another. I love what we're building, and as we've said, for a while now, again, there's no limits on what this team can do, and no excuses either. We got everything that we need. We're certainly not there. There's plenty that we'll have to improve and get better at. But boy, I'm just really thankful for our players and their effort. They are nothing short of amazing today.
Yeah, they really were, Scott. And, it's always tough. We know this in any program. I know you've gone through it in Nebraska several times, and you've got Osborne and what he stood for. And OU had Switzer for all those years. And it's always tough making changes. Last year, Oklahoma went 6-7, and they were 3-6 in conference play in the Big 12, which to Oklahoma standard is not what they expect. But maybe we should have seen this coming with Venables taking over, because down the stretch, they lost by 3 to Baylor. They lost by 3 to West Virginia. They lost by 3 to Texas Tech, and they lost by 3 to Florida State in the bowl game. So you have a new coach getting in with a new system. They weren't getting blown out. Now, look, I know they got blown out by Texas in the Red River. I understand that. They did. And they lost big to TCU, and we know what kind of a magical year TCU had. But both of those games were early in the schedule. But in the latter part of the schedule, 4 of your 4 losses all came by 3, and 1 came in overtime. It's almost like, if you look back now, maybe we should have seen this coming, and the SEC better be paying attention, because they are coming. Both of those teams are coming.
And I'll tell you, they have the right head coach to go to the SEC. And the reason I say that is because Lincoln Riley is a good head coach. He's a good recruiter. But Brent Venables is the antithesis of Lincoln Riley when it comes to what he preaches to his football team. Brent Venables is a defensive-minded guy. So I root for the defensive-minded head coaches, because everybody wants to have the young gun offensive coordinator sling the ball around. But Brent Venables, he's old school. He's tough. You're not going to be an Oklahoma Sooner if you're not tough and you're not about physicality. And that is what Lincoln Riley, just look at USC. USC should have lost to Arizona. They still don't play any defense. And it's kind of, a team takes on the image of a head coach. And I'm not saying Lincoln Riley's not tough, but there's something about Brent Venables when he talks and he gets in front of the team and he preaches physicality and toughness and recruits those type of players. I'm telling you right now, they've cleaned up in recruiting too. Around DFW, some of the greatest players are already signed up to play for Oklahoma, going to the SEC. So I think Brett Venables' style, his toughness, and what he preaches to his team is a perfect move from Big 12 to the SEC, as opposed to having Lincoln Riley as your coach.
I think it was an interesting note that Greg Sankey was at the game. You know who wasn't at the game? The Big 12 commissioner.
Oh, wow.
The SEC commissioner was there. He was taking it in because he knows both of those teams are coming to him. And as you mentioned, these two teams could face each other again in the Big 12 championship. And wouldn't that be something? The two teams that are taken off of the SEC wind up taking their last title in the Big 12 and bring it with them. Scott, I know you don't. What's that? Go ahead.
Does the Big 12 commissioner go to that game? Is he presenting the trophy to the two teams who are leaving the conference?
unless that's one of those you give it to the deputy commissioner.
Yeah, there you go.
Like in the NBA, the NFL draft, and the NBA draft, the commissioner does the first round, then they hand it off to a deputy. Maybe he sends a deputy to that game.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you who he can't wait for the Deion Buffaloes to come to the Big 12, because they are going to ride that cash cow. They'll be on the Deion hype train of the Big 12 next year.
And there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about it for sure. But yeah, interesting to see who was there, and that both of those teams, the Big 12 and the country, seeing what they're losing and what the SEC is going to get. I need to, if I have not given you enough opportunity, Scott, to come to Baton Rouge to visit as many times as we see each other in New Orleans, I'm going to next year, because I just want to rewind back to LSU real quick. Next season, LSU starts the year in Vegas against USC in the Vegas Kickoff Classic. But home games for LSU next year in the here in Baton Rouge. One is against UCLA, and that's the repeat game and the payback game from when LSU went out there a few years ago and lost to UCLA. UCLA will be in Baton Rouge. Ole Miss will be in Baton Rouge. Oklahoma will be in Baton Rouge, and Alabama will be in Baton Rouge. How about that for a home slate in the new look SEC?
Wow!
Whoa.
If you're a student, get those tickets. Get those tickets, because that is as good a home schedule as you will see as a student or as an alum. Yeah, that's a heck of a home schedule to watch.
We'll have to get your boy down from Norman. You guys come make a road trip down here, and we'll come. You can come to Tiger Stadium and see that game. But
there you go.
That SEC is going to be loaded. All right, let's talk about a bad beat before we get out of here. And what was going on in Miami for a team? Florida State, Louisville, North Carolina, all undefeated at the top of the ACC. Miami should be right there with them. And Scott, if you didn't have a chance to see it, for those who didn't see it, here you go. You're down the stretch. Miami's got the ball. Now you notice it's 2nd and 12 with a minute 14 on the clock. Now the play clock resets to 40, and they're going to tick. And at this point, if I would bring the volume up, you'd hear the announcer, Scott, and what we call in the business, they're already signing off. They're already talking about next week. Hey, it was a good game, big win. And then one of them says, what are you doing? There's 40 seconds on the game clock. There's 7 seconds on the play clock. If you milk the clock for 2 more seconds and then you take a knee, everybody's going to the middle of the field to shake hands. Oh, no, not Miami, not up 3. They're going to run a play. And the announcers are going, I don't know what you're doing. So he runs the play. What do you know? Georgia Tech hasn't given up. They go out to try to play for the ball, and they strip it. With no timeout, Scott, they get the ball 75 yards away with 26 seconds to go after a long replay to make sure and confirm it was a fumble. Georgia Tech got the ball, and then this happens on 2nd and 10, their second play with 7 seconds to go, and he unloads one, and Georgia Tech gets out of Miami with a win. You've got to be kidding me. What in the world is going on with the Miami Hurricanes and that play?
Bad football. That's bad ball. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of things about that. Miami would be undefeated. They'd be rising up the rankings, probably in the top 15. And if that's a program that college football, you want to be good, even if you hate the Hurricanes, Miami being good, Nebraska being good, those blue bloods being good, who used to win championships, I think it's good for college football. So it was a horrible loss. And it was a horrible loss for another reason as well. You said it. Take a knee. You give your kids a chance to win. But you go back to Cristobal. When he was at Oregon, and he was playing Stanford, Justin Herbert was his quarterback. They had an opportunity to take a knee. Same thing happened. He refused to take a knee. They fumbled the ball and lost the game. So that tells me a coach is either A, stubborn, or B, dumb. And I don't think he's probably not dumb. He's a head coach in college football. That tells me you're extremely stubborn. You can't be that arrogant to have that happen to you one other time and have this happen. Because if I'm a Miami Hurricane player and I'm saying, listen, this happened to you before when you were a head coach and you still didn't learn your lesson, how do you respect anything that comes out of the guy's mouth if he's not learning lessons on his own throughout the coaching profession?
And how is somebody not screaming in his ear, coach, take a knee, look at the clock? Who's not doing math? Just looking at the clock, it's simple math. You're trained to do that in this sport. You could tell with 10 seconds to go, you're going to get under 40. As soon as you take a knee, the game clock resets, you hand the ball to the official, and everybody's walking to shake hands, and this game is over. Look, with NIL money, and the way that Miami has been so braggadocious about the people that they're bringing in and how much they're giving them, I've got no problem if somebody says that's a fireable offense. That is absurd. You should be undefeated at the top of the ACC. Now you're 9th in the ACC in terms of the standings because of that loss. And you've got a national primetime game coming up this weekend at North Carolina, who is undefeated and ranked. And that's where you should be. After the ball game, as you can imagine, he was asked right away, Coach, can you explain what happened at the end? Here's his quote. I typed it out so you can see it. Quote, the drive started. It was going to be at 1:57, and we ran about 1:27 off. Okay, do the quick math right there. That's already under 40 seconds, but let's continue. And then it was recalibrated. I'm not even sure what he's talking about there unless he's talking about the play clock, but let's keep going. We should have taken a timeout right there at the end. Thought we'd get the first down, and we talked about 2 hands on the ball, but that's not good enough. Just should have told him to take a knee. That's it. Fumbled the ball away at the 25, and they went 75 yards in 2 plays, so no excuses. Scott, after that was his opening quote. Immediately, as you can imagine, because even me reading that, I'm confused. A reporter said, so coach, at the end, you were trying to run a play. Did you not know the time on the clock, or can you just clarify? And he stopped and he paused and kind of looked down and then just said, we should have taken a knee. I don't know what that crap was that he said in the first comment, because you just got to walk up to the microphone and say, that's on me. If you want to say, I don't know how to keep time. If you want to say the batteries ran out in our headsets and nobody was telling me. If you want to say, I thought the score was tied, whatever.
Yeah.
But whatever he tried to explain is just a pile of junk. That's what happened at the end to take a knee.
Yeah, I think in his mind he thought, oh, hell, they're going to go back and find out this happened to me one other time. And I never learned my lesson. I have from a reliable source that he is against taking knees for whatever reason. I don't know if he thinks that some coaches think it's a give-up play, and they don't like to have give-up plays. I'm telling you what, Mario Cristobal, taking a knee is the best play in football. It is the greatest play in football. You need to put it in your playbook, because this whole we don't take a knee BS, it's exactly what it is BS. It is the greatest play in football. Stop cheating your kids. Take a knee next time.
Yeah, well, that's the best phrase. You cheated the kids. You worked hard against a Georgia Tech team that gave you everything on your home field, for a team averaging better than 38 points a game, and it took till almost halftime for somebody to finally score. So you knew you were going to be in a dogfight. You're going to survive, and then you don't take a knee. And then how he says, well, we talked about 2 hands on the ball. Dude, there are 11 other guys on the field in another uniform. You think they're just going to let you run through? If you're going to be dumb enough to run a play, they're going to go for it. And credit Georgia Tech for getting that win. Even their coach said afterwards, I thought they were going to take a knee. Like, they were shocked. It's just, what a horrible beat in so many ways. I think it's horrible for the players. I did not know that he had this belief against not taking knees, but that's an embarrassment.
Yeah, you know what would be great? Here's what would be great, Vic, is the next time they're in that situation and he doesn't take a knee, if he's truly against it, is the running back gets the handoff and takes an immediate knee. That would be a great play.
Right, exactly. Hey, if you can't figure it out, we'll figure it out. We want to win. Obviously you don't. But hey, overall, as we wrap things up, you mentioned a good weekend for all of us. You got the high school win, the OU win for your son, your Nebraska team wins, LSU wins, Saints win. Be good to see if it'll be a big carryover. But LSU comes home again, Scott, in the SEC. So a challenge against Auburn. Oh, it's not the same Auburn we've seen, but still, it's SEC. And we know LSU's defense can give up a lot of points at home and on the road. And for the Saints, the big challenge is, once again, you stay on the road against a much better team than what you just saw in New England. So the challenges are there for both of our local teams this week to be able to perform next weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you're in the SEC play, there are no gimmies. We all know LSU and Auburn is always a great matchup, and it probably could be some points scored again based on the past couple weeks' history with the LSU defense. The Saints game is a tricky game. It really is, because everybody thought when the schedule came out, I really thought the Saints would probably be undefeated. If at worst 4-1 right now, and I thought the Jaguars game would be a kind of a toss-up game. Now you've kind of played back into where you need to get that Jaguars game to stay in pace and win the NFC South. But this is a tricky game. CJ Stroud is showing or playing and saying, I should have been the number 1 overall pick. Kid is playing outstanding. He broke the rookie record for most attempts in the NFL as a rookie without an interception. Still has not thrown an interception. So it's going to be a tough game. D'Amico Ryan's an outstanding coach. Texans, you did a great job doing your homework and getting the right guy. He's going to win a lot of games for you. So it's going to be a tough game. It really is. And they're playing a really skilled young quarterback.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. Look, they've been in the basement for years, but they're starting to put those pieces together with confidence. As you mentioned, Jacksonville makes a coaching change just a couple of years ago. They're playing much better. They're getting great production out of Lawrence at the quarterback position. They just went to London and won 2 games over there, while the NFL keeps pushing them, over the pond. But they got 2 big wins, and they'll come back to the States for one. And then they're going to play on a short week for the Saints, but they got to come here. But it's definitely a much improved Jacksonville game. And while we're talking about teams finding their identity because of where you live, I'm sure things are hot and heavy after the butt kicking the Cowboys took on Sunday night. But I want to ask you a question more about the Niners than the Cowboys. Cowboys might be overhyped, but are the Niners the real deal, playing with a quarterback that nobody ever thought would even be a starting quarterback in the NFL? Because other than the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC, who are quietly just beating people and people aren't talking about them, everybody was focused on Dallas because of the way the defense is played. But then you lose at Arizona, and that was an ass whipping they took at San Francisco. Yeah. There's no question about it. Every sense of the word, they took a beating. Is this more about the Niners being better than what people are thinking than it are about the overhype of the Cowboys?
Yes, I would say the 49ers definitely are the real deal. They have an outstanding coach who can get you in and out of plays that can beat any defense he goes against. He's a great schematic side. They have the personnel within that scheme to beat anybody. They are an outstanding football team. They really are. And when they get in the playoffs, if they get home field advantage, they probably are going to be the favorite to come to the NFC. And if they can stay healthy, I agree with you. The Eagles are flying under the radar. They are playing some really good football, undefeated. But the Cowboys are always just kind of overrated. They start the season off kind of strong. They lost. The alert should have went off when they lost to the Cardinals. I know we say anybody can beat anybody in the NFL, but if you're the team that everybody's talking about you representing the NFC and going to the Super Bowl, and this is finally your year, you don't go on the road and lose as the Cardinals. That's just plain and simple. So I think the Cowboys are overrated. I'm telling you right now, the Cowboys, I don't even know. The debate needs to be had whether or not they're going to make the playoffs. They have the Dolphins, the Bills, the Eagles twice, the Chargers this week. They have a tough road ahead of them still.
I love covering the Saints, and I love talking Saints football with you. But right now, my 1A team is the Miami Dolphins. What they're doing, they are must-watch football. Their offense is filthy.
They are proof that speed kills. Number one, their play caller is out of the Kyle Shanahan tree, so he's putting them in the right place too. But I get so mesmerized by all these GMs every year who won't draft a linebacker because they're not 6'2". They won't draft a running back because they're not 6 foot. They won't draft a wide receiver because they're not 6'3". The Miami Dolphins have Tyreek Hill, who is 5'9". Devon Achane out of Texas A&M, who was too short, lasted till I think the 3rd round. All he can do is all he has, Vic, is world-class speed. Like, they have shown you, start drafting the guys who can play fast football. I mean, they are playing at a different speed, and they broke the record by the greatest show on turf for most yards through the first 5 weeks of the season. So, they are a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, so you got Miami, you got Philadelphia under the radar, you got San Francisco, who looks great. Locally, we're glad the Saints got a win, but just stand by because all week you're going to hear about 2 things. Travis Kelce getting hurt without Taylor Swift at the stadium, and I hear from reliable sources, as in my wife and daughters, that all the Swifties are now trying to ban turf in the NFL. That's topic number 1. Topic 1A is going to be the Dak Prescott contract that he got because he threw 3 picks at San Francisco and once again as a quarterback can't get the job done. Just get ready for it. There are a lot of great stories around the league, Scott. That's what's going to be talking about when we get together next time. I promise you that's going to be the topic that everybody's talking about this week. Dak underdelivers once again, and oh my God, Travis Kelce got hurt.
They're going to put the 49ers in the Super Bowl. They're going to have the Cowboys crisis. Dak Prescott's horrible. That's going to be the main thing. And the real thing here, though, is Vic, from our pregame show, we had the over-under segment of the show. We said, will there be more cutaways to Taylor Swift or more shots or more catches by Kelce? Right. We won that automatically. She didn't even want to go to Minnesota. She's like, wait, it's not the Big Apple? Nah, I'm good.
That's right. Small media market, not for me. I just go to the bigger stadiums. Then a boy gets hurt. So we won that. We won in a walkover. Hey, Scott, appreciate the time kicking off the week. It's always fun. We had a lot to talk about, and we'll do it again to get ready for next weekend when we'll start prepping for some of these big games. All right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Always a pleasure, Scott. With Scott Shanle, I'm Victor Howell. Hope you had a fun sports weekend and get ready for next weekend. We'll have more sports talk with you next time when we see you right here on Game Notes. See you, everybody.